Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for this invitation to be here again. Thank you to this land that feeds me and helps me thrive. And thank you for the land, or to the land that fed me until I was strong enough to fly with my own wings, this land that is called Colombia today. Today I want to share some thoughts about epistemological equity. And there is a lot of resonance with what Mario Alonso shared this morning. Let's see. So, where we start shapes where we end. I want us to bring our attention to what is sometimes identified as point of departure. Where, when, how do we start? Our origin stories. Because our origin stories create the larger framework, consciously, not so consciously, and unconsciously, about how we organize our relationships with everybody, humans and other than humans, and everything else. So, when we have origin stories where there is an opposition between the divine, what is upstairs and what is downstairs, we create that kind of relationship and we leave that kind of relationship. When we create origin stories of guilt and blame, that's what we carry. And that's how we organize. When we create origin stories of domination, we do that. But when our origin story, when our point of departure is a point of departure of relationship, and like I said yesterday, acknowledging that we are only a little part of this universe and this planet, and coexist with everyone here, humans and other than humans, then we paint another picture and we organize our lives in a different way. So, a few points about what I'm going to call my Southern indigenous mind. Tenets, principles that can organize a different point of departure. One is that all things are sacred. Everything is sacred. All beings, human and other than human, are sacred. The stones are sacred, the water, the mountains, all our companion animals, the plants, everyone. Everyone is sacred. So if I acknowledge that, then my relationship with everything is going to be a little bit different. And everything is connected. Everything that we do, and especially everything that we don't do, everything that is kept invisible, everything that is not acknowledged, shapes relationships. So when we start to acknowledge how we are all connected, we necessarily have to behave with each other and everyone else in a different way. Life and development are understood in terms of cycles. In my worldview, I prefer to not talk about death and dying, but crossing over, because I believe that this is not the only world. We're simultaneously living in different worlds, even right now. So there are other worlds when we cross over. And psilocybin is a great helper to help us move, navigate all these different worlds. Entheogens help us do that. The relationship to a space that is so minimized in my Western mind is incredibly important in my Southern indigenous mind, much more important than the relationship to time. This is why, for me, the mountains, I come from the mountains of the Andes, are so important, and the water that comes from the mountains. The mountains are alive with their ecosystems. And because they are alive and they are sacred and they have their own spirit, it only makes sense that we communicate with them and that they communicate with us. as well as the water, as well as the rocks, as well as everything. There is a cycle of life that animals and plants teach us about. If we pay attention, our relationship to crossing over would also change. Reciprocity. Reciprocity is about balance. I won't extend too much of that. We heard about that yesterday and this morning. But it's about balance. It's not a transactional thing where you give and take. It's about balance with everybody. This is why, in some cosmologies, the relationships that you have to heal are not only with humans, but it could be with all these other non-humans who live around you that you have to bring balance to. So in this context, we must include race, gender, class, sexual orientation in all of who we are, because that involves acknowledging the histories, the geographies of all of who we are. I'm not only a person of color, I'm much more than that, and that needs to be included. All of who we are, where we come from, and where we're going. So, from this point of view, relevant healing places emphasize the social, historical, and political contexts that have shaped our experience, lives, and perceptions. So repair and healing, from my point of view, it's not only repair and healing with me or with humans. It's taking care of the mountains, the water, of all the sacred aspects of this beautiful planet that we live in. Relevant healing encourages balance and harmony within a person's life and in relationship to others. So we have to look to all our relationships, not just the human relationships, but everything. So one of the biggest differences between my Western mind and my Southern indigenous mind has to do with the hubris of the zero-point epistemology and relational epistemologies. Epistemology is about how we know. It's the question of how do we know. And I'm talking about epistemological justice because there is a dominance of one way of knowing. And I invite you to think about other ways of knowing in everything we do, not only research, everything. So the hubris of the zero-point epistemology is about the arrogance of believing that you can be an objective mind observing another one, and defining and categorizing and measuring that other one. And that applies to psilocybin, because psilocybin is a living being with their own consciousness and their own spirituality. And who am I to put myself in front of this beautiful being and say, I know you, I'm going to manipulate you, et cetera, et cetera. So what would happen if we move from starting from this dichotomy and division between subject and object, and if we start thinking about how to know in terms of subject to subject in terms of humans, and subject to subject in terms of everybody else, because everyone has consciousness. The fact that I can't know somebody's consciousness does not mean that they don't have it. That's a very arrogant point of view. So if we start with a point of view, a relational stance of subject to subject, that immediately is going to bring into the picture humility, which we need a lot. But it's coming from that understanding and that position of being in relationship with. So I want to leave you with this question. Where do we want to start if we were Where do we want to start if where we end is most drastically experienced in the next generation? Where do we want to start now if we know that most of the experience, most of the impact of what we do is going to be experienced in the next generation? If we start there, what would happen? Thank you.
Thank you. One more round of applause, please. Joining Pilar today is Marlena Robbins. And Marlena is Daine Navajo from the Yidaines Taichini tribe, which is the Great Red Running into Water People clan, actually. She holds a master's in American Indian Studies and Indigenous Rights and Social Justice. Her thesis titled, Art as a Spiritual Expression for Indigenous Well-Being, focused on advocating for the art within the fields of Indigenous mental health and community wellness. She has developed and implemented expressive arts programming for Community Bridges, Inc., a substance abuse and behavioral health nonprofit. She served as an assistant director and a grant writer of the Cultural Coalition, Inc., an arts and culture nonprofit. She's a doctoral student at UC Berkeley School of Public Health and of Interdisciplinary Studies, focusing on the advancement of sacred plant medicines in tribal nations. Let's put our hands and hearts together for Marlena.
This one's for the ancestors, so don't drink it.
Thank you.
Good morning. Yat bene. She Marlena Robbins yinisha ya idina atachitni nishle. Todachitni bashichin todak oje dashiche tabahan dashinele. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being open to this presentation. Thank you for sharing space with me. My name is Marlena Robbins. I'm Dene from Window Rock, Arizona, and Crystal, New Mexico. And my talk today, is about mushrooms and how they change the entire trajectory of my life and how I'm choosing and learning to meet that medicine halfway. So I grew up in Window Rock, Arizona on the Navajo Reservation with my mom, my dad, my 2 older sisters. And regardless of the horrid statistics that tend to plague tribal identity, such as addiction, trauma, domestic violence, abuse, gang violence, I had a fairly good upbringing, and I really loved my childhood. I love where I grew up. I love my community. And it was because I was tied directly to our language, our culture, our ceremony, and our people. But unfortunately, that didn't stop those problems, those issues from finding their way into our home. And so my father was addicted to alcohol for a very long time. He left the reservation when I was 9 years old, and he left to heal. He found sobriety, and he was sober for 38 years. And thank you. Yes. And he brought medicine back to our family. My mom found sobriety, my sisters found sobriety. And as I struggled with my own addiction to alcohol, I changed when I became a mother. And I had my son, and he helped me find new purpose in my life. And I started questioning my relationship to alcohol. What is it doing to my body, to my spirit, to my mind? How is it affecting my relationship to my child? And so I woke up one day and I said, okay, that's it. I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. I stopped. I stopped drinking. I've been sober now 8 years. And when I did that, I started surrounding myself with really healthy people and started down my own healing path. And I found art, and I started painting, and painting became my medicine. The creative process became my therapy. And I wanted to share that medicine. And so I started conducting expressive art programming for substance abuse and behavioral health nonprofit, cultural arts organizations, organizing with different indigenous artists to bring in cultural events based on the creative process. And I knew that at one point I was giving from an empty cup, and I knew that there was more that I needed to heal from. You know, if I had struggled with addiction, where was that addiction coming from? What was the source of it? It's unhealed trauma. And I wanted to heal. I wanted to heal my family. And my partner came to me and he said, have you ever tried mushrooms? And I said, no. You know, I had altered my consciousness in other ways with other substances, and mushrooms just I was very hesitant to do them and very nervous. But from being in ceremony, you know, he brought the mushrooms to me. We made sure our home was clean, the dishes were done, the beds were made, there were no pressing issues, no deadlines, and above all, my son was safe, and he was in a good space. And the message that I got from that first experience was love, and my reconnection to love, and just feeling love again, and knowing that I was deserving of it, that I was worthy of it, that it was still very much intact and a part of me. And so I went to my family and I said, you know, I love you. I love my sisters. I love my mom. I love my dad. And I said, but I know that there's some unhealed trauma here. I know that there's stories that you guys haven't told me, and that's okay. But I see it affecting you in our eating habits, the way that we think about ourselves, the way that we think about others. I want to heal it. Let's talk about it. Let's sit with this medicine and ask them to heal our family so that we can heal others. And so my mom and my sisters didn't do it with me, and that's okay. They experienced psychedelics recreationally, socially, but I was proposing something different with this medicine. I was looking at them as medicine, at the mushrooms. So my mom came, and she experienced them too, recreationally, socially. I said, Mom, I want to heal. Let's heal. So on winter solstice, we took 4 grams of a mushroom called penis envy, and also known as a hero dose. And we sat with them, you know, same process, cleaned the home, did our laundry, made sure the beds were made, made sure the dishes were done. And we sat with the altar. We said, we're trying to heal. Help us heal. Show us what we need to do to heal. We prayed with them. We talked to them. We held them in our hands. And then my mom and I, we laid down, and she held me. And in Navajo, we have a word called hojon, and it means beauty and love and patience and calmness and harmony. And I felt it. It was a pure glimpse of hojon. And I felt like I was in her womb again. It was so beautiful. She was holding me, and she was like, don't be taking so much. You're so tiny. And then she rolled over, and she went to sleep. And I rolled over, and I had the most terrifying, challenging, difficult experience on those mushrooms. And my entire life, the mushrooms said, you know, you want to heal? Like, this is what you're asking for? This is what it is. Sit with it. Acknowledge it. Accept it. Be a part of it. Confront it. And I was like, you know, I see you. I'm trying to heal you. Thank you for presenting yourself. Goodbye. And they're like, no. You're going to sit with this. You're going to confront it. You're going to, You can do this. So I got up, I went to the living room, and I sat in front of our altar, and I burned some cedar, and I started praying. And I looked up, and I saw a painting that I recreated of this image. This is my mom during her kinalda ceremony with my great-grandparents. And our great-grandma was a hand trembler. She was a medicine person. And I had another painting of my grandpa, my Che. And the message that I got from that experience was, you're a granddaughter. You come from a line of healers. This medicine gets passed down generation to generation. It's a part of you. It's gifted to you. Now, how are you going to share it? You know, I shared the medicine through my art and introducing art as a healthy outlet. This is another healing path. How do you want to use this? How do you want to help this message and share this message and share this medicine? This is my Che, this is my grandpa. And so I started researching mushrooms after that. Changed the entire trajectory of my life, started watching as many YouTube videos, as many TED Talks, reading as many books as I could. Found a community with Shakruna Institute where I could talk with people, experience people on a huge spectrum, from psychonauts to people who were just starting to explore this medicine, and started making microdoses. I started cultivating mushrooms, and started myself on a microdosing regimen, shared microdoses with my family, my close friends, close family, and just engulfing myself in this world of psychedelics and psychedelic research. And then my dad got sick, and he was diagnosed with stage 4 liver and gallbladder cancer on Father's Day. And I went to him and I said, you know, Dad, they're doing studies on end-of-life cancer patients using psilocybin mushrooms to help come to terms with their transition, to help their transcendence into the next world. And he was open to the conversation. We didn't do it, but I think that a big part of the reason why was he was in Vietnam. He grew up during the Nixon administration. He was already tied to this taboo of these medicines being drugs, harmful drugs. It's a class 4 felony in Arizona. It's a Schedule 1 drug. They'll make you go crazy. And he was already tied up in this taboo and this way of thinking. So for me, it was the fact that he even had it as an option, that it was even made available to him, that he had access to it. I said, Dad, I have this medicine here with me. It's here for you if you want it, if you need it. That was beautiful. And that was enough for me to apply to UC Berkeley in the Doctor of Public Health program, and really wanting to change this narrative, this way of thinking, change these taboos, and reestablish our connections to these medicine as indigenous people. And building accessibility. And so three things, and 3 things that they're evolving. I'm still asking these questions, but 1, indigenous people need to bring this medicine to indigenous people, not Western science. And building these cross-border global connections between indigenous cultures and helping this medicine adapt, adopt, and evolve into new ways of being shared. Indigenous people don't need to be studied or poked or prodded. We need to heal. There's enough to heal from: colonization, intergenerational trauma, forced religion, boarding school trauma. We need this medicine, and we need to reestablish our connection to it. 2, we need to meet this medicine halfway. It is not a cure-all. It is not a Band-Aid. It is not a one and done. We need to put the messages that we're receiving from this medicine into practice. And with doing that, building a social ecological model. So when you heal one person, it reverberates, it ripples out into the community. And that one person can go and can help another person heal, help them integrate these messages and reconnect to their true purpose here, their intention here. What are we doing here? What is our purpose here? Is it to teach? Is it to be a part of our food systems? Is it to cultivate food? Is it to share religion, share culture? And this is my family now. So, and a really quick story that I do want to share. When I was at UC Berkeley and I was touring the campus, at the end of the week, my mom was here, my son, my partner, and we went for a tour, sightseeing, went to Muir Woods, Redwoods, and we went to eat afterwards. And we were talking about, I'm meeting all these people and crossing paths and really talking about psychedelics and bringing it back to our culture, back to our people to help them heal. And we were sitting down at dinner, and I look up, and there's Paul Stamets. My boyfriend's like, that's not Paul Stamets. What would Paul Stamets be doing at Hog Island Oyster? And I was like, that's Paul Stamets. So we did a Google search. He's like, oh yeah, that's Paul Stamets. And my son was like, Mom, go talk to him. Because he had just watched Fantastic Fungi. And he's like, go talk to him. And I was like, okay. So I went up. I said, excuse me, are you Paul Stamets? He said, yes. Yes, I am. I was like, oh shit. It's incredible. So I think that's the biggest sign I could get doing this work, crossing paths with him, and huge sign from the universe. We're exactly where we're meant to be, hearing the words we're meant to hear. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing space. Thank you for being open to this experience. Akeha.
Beautiful. So we're going to kick off our Q&A here, and I have questions coming in from the audience, so thank you so much. But I'd also like to ask a question of both of you, just in terms of when we talk about core assumptions and untruths that we in the Western world may be living by. What are some core assumptions and untruths that we might want to target and be aware of as we build our relationships with mushrooms and other psychedelics that come from traditional cultures? Let me start with you, Doctor.
Thank you. I just reiterate that a false assumption is that this is all about humans and we're the first and only ones. We're not. It's not all about us. Let's start with relationship with everyone, meeting them consciousness to consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This is tied to my research as a student indigenous fellow with the Berkeley Center for the Science of Psychedelics, and I'm about to embark on a research focusing on multi-generational perspectives of psilocybin mushrooms in rural and urban communities in the North and Southwest United States. So looking at indigenous people, we're not all these mystical beings who talk to animals, and we're human. We have a huge spectrum of perspectives when it comes to these medicines. We're not all on the same page. Some are very conservative, some are liberal, and we're all influenced by politics, religion, different cultures, different point of views, different perspectives. So really taking us out of that silo and seeing us as people.
And a question coming in, how do you see manufacturers practicing respectful and healthy relationship, having a healthy relationship with the mushroom? How might manufacturers be in right relation? Let's start with you, Pilar.
Well, there are different ways of thinking about this, and I'm just going to share one. your own basket. We have to weave our own basket of relationship with everyone. We're not empty. Nobody's empty. So for me, I would start from the point of view of relationship. How do we want, if I'm manufacturing, how do I want to establish right relationship with this beautiful being? In what ways should I honor that relationship? What ceremonies should be in place for me and those of us working in the manufacturing process so that we come to relationship with psilocybin in a way in which we're going subject to subject? And would I listen to psilocybin and hear their guidance about how they want to be in relationship with me in that manufacturing process? One more thing to add, having conversation with other humans that would help us stay accountable to what we're doing is really important in this process. And right from the beginning, I would say I would involve people who would help me stay accountable, who would think different than me, and who would be fierce in sharing their truth with me so that I can stay in dialogue and think about different ways of doing this.
Yeah, I think when we think of manufacturers, or at least when I think of them, I think of capitalism and exploitation and all this money that is being thrown at this research, these studies being conducted, and all of it, for me, comes back to accessibility and making sure that this medicine is accessible to my people and my community and where I grew up, because there's enough to be healed there with this medicine. And right now, it's only accessible to those wealthy enough to afford it. And manufacturers and corporations, it's a whole other realm, but it comes down to accessibility.
Thank you. And Dr. Hernandez, can you elaborate more about the difference between the indigenous and Western epistemologies? What are the indigenous ways of knowing?
There are many indigenous ways of knowing. So I'm only speaking about the little bit of what I know from my own experience as a person, my personal journey, as well as my professional life. One of those main aspects is the pillar of positivism and neo-positivism, which is the division between subject and object, and the hubris of the zero epistemology. Just that, starting there, makes it's what creates everything. This is why we use the language of the other. And you see, when we talk from that epistemological perspective, that we talk about psilocybin, or even some of the people that we know have carried these traditions as they, and as something that you want to know. So our language is already embedding that otherization, that objectivization, that takes away the relationship, that makes invisible what kind of relationship we have. So how we talk matters because it reflects also how we're thinking. From a relational perspective, if we're thinking about subject to subject, or subjects and subjects, we would have to enter into dialogue with everyone and hear what they have to say. So it would be valid to participate and get to know a ceremony, but this will come from that other perspective. We would be a part of it. We would acknowledge that there are different experiences and different perspectives, and we would check with each other what that is like, to come with practices that resonate for people and other beings in specific geographies and historical times. What might be a good practice here might not be a good fit in another place. But we come to share how we relate to our environments, to the oceans, to the mountains, to the wind, because we do it in different ways, and then we come to share that wisdom that works for some people, some beings, and works for others. So the whole corpus of knowledge would look very different, and we would use different language for it.
Thank you. Marlena, this question is for you. What opportunities do you see for tribal folks who don't have a cultural psychedelic lineage to use mushrooms for personal and collective healing?
I think that as this medicine evolves and there's new forms of it, psychedelic assisted therapy, microdosing, I think that indigenous people should be given the option and be able to explore them for themselves. Like I said, we're human, we're people, we all have our own traumas that we're healing from. And I think that indigenous people, we're modern contemporary people. We're not these historical figures that are often tied to Hollywood Indians. And Native people who don't have a direct lineage to this medicine should be given the option to create those cross-border connections. So going to the South, the indigenous people in the South, and learning and creating the dialogue and changing that narrative and creating those global connections. There's indigenous people to the South, there's indigenous people to the North, and really building those bridges of communication and saying, you know, we're healing from colonization, we're healing from intergenerational trauma. And this is what our community is. This is what our community is dealing with. Let's talk to these other communities over here who had similar experiences and see how we can help each other, see how we can build bridges and share the medicine, share those cultures, share that knowledge, and those indigenous worldviews, those indigenous perspectives.
Thank you. Another question for you both. As we are building out all types of organizations in the psychedelic field, we do know, this section is psychedelics in the wild, like psychedelics in the world. Many people are accessing psychedelics on their own, not in clinical settings. And I'm curious from your perspectives, what are some practices and ways of being that folks who are approaching psychedelics in their own exploration, what are some things and practices that they should be aware of and instituting as they explore their personal relationships with psychedelics?
Yeah. Make sure your home is clean. Make sure. It's a new form of ceremony, if you want to look at it that way. Cultures adapt, they adopt, they evolve, and I had to learn how to evolve ceremony to meet me in my home, and that involved doing the dishes. And we talk about, in the mornings before you go outside to pray before the sun comes up, and that's when the holy people are going around and they're looking and they're seeing, is your bed made? Are your clothes picked up off the floor? Is your laundry done? Are your dishes done? Is your floor swept? And then they hear your prayers and they say, okay, Let's listen to this person. If you're asleep, they're going to go on by. They're like, oh, they don't need anything. They're fine. And so when we're working with this medicine, we're calling those beings in. We're calling that consciousness of this medicine in, and we're talking to it and saying, and this is what I'm anxious about, or this is what I'm worried about, or this is what I'm trying to figure out. Can you help me? I'm asking for your help as a humble person, as humbly as possible. And just creating that connection and looking at seeing this medicine as conscious, living, breathing beings. It's not just a pill. It's not just a thing. They're beings. Mm-hmm.
Be ready for the challenge. We know, many of you know, that these journeys in other worlds are meant to challenge us in so many ways. It's not necessarily easy. I would say be open to let go of control and let the spirit of the plants guide you, of the fungi guide you, and know that there will be challenges ahead. And it takes courage to make this choice and to take that first step. So don't take it lightly.
Thank you. And with that, we are complete with this session, so please, one more round of applause for Pilar and Marlena.